Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Tuana and I am the Developer Advocate at Multi-Tenancy. Hope you have all been enjoying our new building blocks track. This is the first time we're trying it. I hope I've been enjoying it too. I have pre-recorded this, so I should be watching with you guys right now. And I am going to be presenting something that's going to last a bit longer than the other talks you've seen. Because it's slightly more technical and will also include some coding towards the end. And I'm going to try and keep it as short and simple as possible. If you have not before integrated any Multi-Tenancy dashboards into your platform, some of these concepts might be a bit strange to you, or you might not understand what's going on, which is completely understandable. We will be linking to further blogs and tutorials about what we're talking about right now in the description. All right, so let me switch to the presentation. I will show you guys what I mean and the demo we are trying to achieve by the end of this talk in a bit. But before that, what we want to do is multi-tenancy in short. And for those of you who don't know what multi-tenancy means, in the context of Kumulayo or a BI tool as Kumulayo, you can imagine it as being a platform that allows for multiple users to log in and see only data relevant to them, and maybe even custom theming related to them. So it's multi-tenant. So what we're going to do with this talk is we're going to try and set up a multi-tenant Kumulayo data analytics platform, and we're going to include advanced customizations with our multi-tenancy platform, and we're going to be making use of Kumulayo tags, and we'll be using Auth0 as our authentication platform. Before showing you what the end result looks like, some brief introduction to those of you who don't know about what Kumulayo is. Kumulayo is a data visualization platform. It's API first, so even though we have a very user-friendly UI where you can drag and drop charts pretty easily, no technical background needed, all of the functionality that you can achieve via the UI, you can also achieve via the API, which we'll be using extensively today. It's also multilingual by default. You can add as many languages as you want nearly, and very easily adapted to a multi-tenant setup. And you can also have data-driven actions. So by this we mean you can click on a chart and zoom into data at that point. We call these drill-through dashboards, for example. You can include custom events that you can cater to your needs and design as the way you want it to. But most importantly, the number one thing we focus on is seamless embedding. So any of the Kumulayo dashboards you create are easily embeddable and integratable into your own platforms, applications, websites, whatnot. So this is what Kumulayo is. And before getting into the next slide, I want to show you what we are going to end up at. So this application was developed by some of our solutions engineers to display how multi-tenancy and advanced customizations could be built with Kumulayo. So when you first go to it, you're greeted by a login page. We always have two of our trusty mascots in these types of demos, Angelina and Brad, Angelina Julie and Brad Potts to be precise. So if we log in as Angelina, you will see that a few things you should notice is that she has everything in English. That's number one. Number two, she has two dashboards available to her. We're looking at marketing here right now, but on the left you can also see sales. And if we go back to marketing, let's switch back. You'll see that there are certain colors that she likes and her charts are displayed in. This will be clearer when we switch to Brad in a bit. There's her logo up here, her company logo, which is also actually a part of the dashboard. And this text box here has her name. One thing to note is that the dashboard from Kumulayo is this, I hope you can see my mouse box here, which is being integrated into the wider web page. One final thing that I want to share, we won't be looking into detail as to how this is achieved in this specific application, but if you are interested in how to design custom events, then we will be linking to the previous talk I gave for the previous data talks, which was a talk on achieving the custom events for our Spotify dashboard. I'll also link to that. So here what's going on is, if you click, you'll see some options. These are the custom events that we set up in our dashboards. And if you select one, this is where you see drill through dashboard. So what's going on here is we're focusing on that data point and we're sort of zooming in and seeing more detail on that data point. We won't be going into much detail on that in this talk. So if I were to log out, one final thing to do now is log in as Brad. And some things you'll notice immediately is how the colors have changed and how he has extra dashboards here. So this is all in French. Again, another thing to notice that it's in French, his desired language. If we were to switch to English so that's easier, you'll see there's an extra one here called leads that Angelina did not have access to. So this is it. So the main thing here that you should take note of is that this dashboard in Kumu.io is actually one dashboard. So we create a template dashboard in Kumu.io, and then it's completely up to our multi-tenant setup as to how this dashboard is filled or filtered. So this allows for us to only have to maintain one dashboard in Kumu.io while providing all of our end users their own catered dashboards with their own theming and only the data relevant to them. The other thing that I didn't point out while we were back at Angelina's one is that you might have noticed that the numbers here have all changed. That's because Brad belongs to another company, HD Leuven, while Angelina belonged to HD Antwerpen. So we also make sure that the dashboard data is filtered to the data only relevant to them. And that's it. This is what we're going to end up at. So let's go back to the presentation. Let me go back to. All right, so the journey, we say that consists of 3 steps to achieve an integrated analytics platform with Kumu.io. The 3 main steps being connect, create, and integrate. So we always say the connect step is connecting the data you want to use, and then the next is creating the dashboard, and then finally integrating those dashboards into your own application. Just as a side note, I will not be doing the connect step at all in this talk. I'll only be concentrating on briefly the create part. The dashboards are already created, but I will show you some key things we had to enable, and then the integrate part. All right, so the steps I'm going to take here is, first of all, I'm going to show you how we set up our users, and then we're going to, as I said, go and check out how we set up the dashboard, especially the tags and parameters. And then we are going to switch to coding, and we'll be getting the dashboards and then filtering and setting custom themes and CSS. All right, I won't be going to my Auth0 account on here, but I've got a snapshot of what my user management in Auth0 looks like. Once you create an application in Auth0, you can also create users, roles, and then you can also add some extra details about your users. So if you were to go and click on the 3 dots here and say view details, you would get a page with some extra details, including the option to add metadata. So I've got Angelina and Brad here, and if I were to have clicked on those 3 dots and requested to see more detail, I would have user metadata that I fill in, and I'd be also using app metadata. So these are already filled in on my Auth0 account. And user metadata you can imagine as data that the user themselves also has control over. So Brad is always free to change the preferred language he uses, and he's always free to change the colors that he picks. So the base color and all the colors you see in the charts. However, app metadata you can imagine it as being something that more of an admin has control over. So app metadata has information such as his company name and ID. And also we have included scope. So this talk is actually an extension on a talk that Carmen gave in our previous Data Talks event, where she explained multi-tenancy setup as well. The main addition to that talk we have here is the inclusion of scope. So scope is where we include dashboard names that the user has access to. So you can see here that Brad has access to marketing leads, sales, and the marketing drill through, that one that popped up when you clicked on the chart. However, Angelina has access to just marketing and sales and the marketing drill through. She also has her own user metadata and her own company name and ID. So parameters will be used to filter the dashboards on her company ID, so that she only sees data relevant to her company ID, whereas scope will be used in our application to make sure that she actually has access to the dashboard as a whole and only display the dashboard or integrate the dashboard if she does. All right, let's switch to how we create our dashboards. Here you see my Kumulayo account with the 4 dashboards that we're using in the demo: marketing, drill through, leads, and sales. We're only going to do a few things here. The dashboard's already created. I just want to show you some key things we have to do to retrieve the dashboards. So if you were to go on info, you'll see that there's a section for tags. I've already added a tag, but let's assume I didn't. The tag I'm going to be using is Auth0 MT, and I'm going to be adding these tags in all of the other dashboards as well. Tags in Kumulayo are a way to group dashboards or datasets, and you can actually use them in an API call to get all of the dashboards that have the tag Auth0 MT, for example. So that's what we're going to be doing. One other thing I want to show is how we've created the names for French and English here. So here you see the English name, but we've also added the French name, which you can also do in your own dashboards or any other language you might want as well. So let's switch back to dashboards. Leads and sales also have the same tag. The only dashboard that has a slightly different tag is the drill through one. Instead of Auth0 MT, we're also adding the -DT here, and this is going to help us categorize what dashboard is what in our application. So we're going to put the main dashboards in one group and the drill through dashboard in another group. That's going to help us not add the drill through dashboard in one of the tabs on the sidebar. These extra 2 tags that look a bit crazy are the tags that we use to keep track of what custom event that you saw before has triggered this dashboard to appear. We won't be going into much detail about that in this talk, but there is a blog post of quite an extensive tutorial that walks you through how these are actually used, and I will link to that in the description too. Okay, before we switch to the code, let's also add the parameters and filters that we need in our dashboard. For that, I'm going to go to the marketing dashboard. When you have a dashboard like this, the first thing you might notice here is that the colors are very different to what you saw in the application, and the logo does not exist, and the text does not have the person's name, and the numbers also look different. The reason is because, number one, here we've added a filter with a default parameter. So one of the things that we're going to do here is when a user logs in, Auth0 is going to send us some of the metadata we already set up. One of those is the company ID, if you remember. So what we do here, I've already created it, but if you were to create a new one, you would go to filters and edit parameters. And let me delete this for now and recreate it. And you'd say, I want a new parameter. Let's say company ID, that's a numeric array. And we're giving it a dummy value for now so that we actually see data in our editable dashboard. Otherwise, it shows up with no data and it's a bit hard to read. So I'm doing that and I'm creating it and then I'm saving that. Now we've got our parameter. We actually want to use the parameter. Again, I already created it, but if you were to go to dashboard filters, you could again edit, and we are going to be using client ID, which is one of the fields in the mock data we're using that is equivalent to our company ID that's coming from Auth0. And we're saying client ID is in company ID. If you were to delete this, I'm going to redo it again. You can say client ID is in, and then here you can click this for your parameters that you've created, and you say company ID is in company ID, client ID, and then if you apply, then you filtered your dashboard to that company ID. Right now it's taking in the dummy 0 we provided, but when we create the authorization token correctly in our application, that company ID parameter will be filled in with whatever parameter came from Auth0. One final thing we're going to do is we're going to go to dashboard settings, and we're going to set, hopefully you can see that, yes you can, theme to custom. And that's it. The only other thing in this dashboard that I'm not really going to be talking about that we enabled was on this specific chart, we went to its settings, and here you have an interactivity tab. Hopefully you can see that. My head is not covering it. All right, it is covering custom events here, but down here there's custom events where we added a select campaign event. For more information, like I said, the Spotify dashboard talk and blog post goes through extensively how to set up these custom events. So we will link to that, but I won't be going into detail on it here. All right, now we've got our dashboards. Now let's switch to the code and see how we actually get them displayed. I stopped the previous application from running, and now it's running this skeleton code that you're seeing. So if you were to go back to the main application now, it looks like this for Angelina. It's just a skeleton of it, and we'll slowly be adding and integrating into this application. So this code that we're seeing now, this repository is a reduced version of the main demo repository. Both of them are linked. And the first commit, if you were to want to go through this yourself, is a skeleton. And it's when you run it, you see what I just showed you. And there are prompts as to what the step you should take is. And the two files that we're going to be looking at is server.js. This is our server where we create our authorization tokens and set up our custom CSS, theming, filtering, and dashboard client. And that's just a file I created so that all of the functions related to getting dashboards and grouping dashboards into tabs or drill throughs, all of those functions belong to that file. Briefly, I'll show you some front-end code. It's already there, but some front-end code exists to actually add the dashboards to the correct front-end component. But that already exists. I'll only briefly show you. Okay, first things first, what I want to show you is that when this application first starts, let me scroll down. The first thing that it calls is dashboard client get dashboards. So this is the first thing we're going to be changing in dashboard client. But before that, two things I've done that you should do whenever you're starting up a Kumu.io integration is creating my Kumu.io client. So I've already got my API key and token from Kumu.io, and I've created my client. And the other thing is I've instantiated a dashboard client, and the dashboards that this server is aware of is the dashboards that the dashboard client has created. So that's what we're going to be doing now. So let's switch over. So this is dashboard client, and the first thing we want to do is actually define the tags that we want to be searching for dashboards to get, and create some sort of data structure to keep track of what dashboards we have access to. So we have tag, and you may remember that we called it Auth0 MT, and we have drill through tag, and we called that the same thing, although it had a DT at the end. And then we are going to keep track of all the dashboards that we get. Now for that, we have created a sort of data structure that keeps track of the tabs. So this one will be used to create the sidebar with the name. And then we also have drill throughs, and we want that to be separate from the main tabs. So that's the first thing we do. And then you would notice that get dashboard that we had already called from the server. What that does is it's not doing it now, but we'll fill it up. It gets all dashboards, and then we call a helper function that I won't go through, group dashboards, which groups the dashboards that it got from Kumul.io into either tabs or drill throughs. So I won't go through that, but I will get all of the dashboards. So what I'm going to do here is I've already prepared a skeleton function wrapper, get all dashboards. So theoretically what I want to happen is I want to get all dashboards, and hopefully if that works we can group them into tabs and drill throughs. All right, so this is probably one of the most important parts of this coding exercise, is requesting the correct dashboards from Kumul.io. So for that we're going to be using client.get, and the first thing we put is securable. Now dashboards in Kumul.io is securables, as are some other things as well. So the first thing we say is type of thing I want to get is a securable, and the way we define that securable is a dashboard is by adding this where property. So we say where the type is dashboard. And then we continue. So the other thing we want to say is when you're returning these dashboards to me, please include its ID and name attributes. So we say attributes, and we include ID and name. All right, I'm just going to check whether I have any typos anywhere. It doesn't seem like I do. If all is well, I'll continue. And then this next one, I'm going to copy paste this one, and I'm going to actually talk about it. This is where we sort of filter to the tag we want. So this search block, what it's doing is it's saying, please match the tags to the key phrase this.tag. So that key phrase is auth0-mt. And there are different ways of getting dashboards based on tags, but we choose this one because searching and matching key phrases allows us to not only get the dashboards that have auth0-mt, but also auth0-mt-dt, because that one also includes the first bit auth0-mt. So that's the main reason we're using this one. And then finally, we also want to include all of the other tags that the returned dashboard has. So that's why we use this extra property as well. Now we have this. Hopefully that should work. We've got all our dashboards, and now we want to actually return them to the front end and do something with them. Okay, before I go into do that, maybe what I could do is switch to server. So the way the front end requests dashboards is by calling the dashboards endpoint, and it requests for all of the dashboards that are available. So theoretically, what we want to do here is we want to, we've already got the dashboards from the dashboard client, but we want to check whether the user actually has access to see the dashboard before we display it to them. Before we go and see how that works, at this point I want to just quickly add a console log to show you whether and how this is working. So let's have a look at dashboards, and then let's add and then I'll restart it. Just as a reminder, we've already created the dashboards and filled the dashboards in dashboard client. So this one, when we called get all dashboards, it's already grouped those dashboards into tabs or drill throughs. So by this point, we should already have dashboards. So let me restart this. And let's switch back to the main application. Again, we're not going to see much going on here, but at least it's going to help us request dashboards. And if we go here, hopefully we'll get some logs out. And there we go. Dashboards have tabs. In those tabs, you'll see marketing, etc. And then it also has drill throughs. So marketing drill throughs here, and my head is hiding the drill throughs name. All right. So we know that works. Now let's actually return those dashboards to the front end, but let's make sure we only return the ones that the user is allowed to see. At this point, if we were to just return dashboards, if you remember, Angelina didn't really have access to leads, and if we were to just return dashboards as it is, and switch back to the main application and reload, you'll see that she actually does have leads at this point. So now we want to make sure that she does not. You also notice that there is no filtering going on, no custom theming going on, nothing, no logo. Yeah, so let's sort that out. Let me switch back again. Okay, so let's make that empty again. So the first thing we could do is imagine we want to return a scoped dashboards. And this one is basically the same, not table, tabs, and drill throughs. And we're just going to be filling it up. So to get the scope of a user, we already have a function here called getUserProperty, where you can define what property you want. These properties would be the properties you saw in the Auth0 setup, such as parameters, scope, etc. And it would ask Auth0 to return to us the user property. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy paste this again, and I'm going to be getting the scope of the user. Now if we were to return to the presentation and go back one slide, let me find it and go back one slide. So this is where we're returning user property scope. So we're returning dashboards in the case of Brad and Angelina. And then let's switch back. So we've got the scope. The next thing we want to do is filter the dashboards object we have and add the dashboards that the user is scoped to have into scoped dashboards. Hopefully you're seeing the right place. I think you are. Great. Okay, so the first thing we can do is initially just check whether the scope even includes dashboards. It's possible that it doesn't. So if scope dashboards exist, then do something. And then let's say One extra thing that I want to add here is the ability to have a star in the scope dashboard, and if that does exist, we automatically include all of the dashboards. So the first block I'm going to add is this. So this says if the dashboards scope dashboards includes a star, then the scoped dashboard tabs and drill throughs are the dashboard tabs and drill throughs. So there's no need to filter. Okay, else. Okay, now we're going to check whether we even have tabs in dashboards, whether we were even able to get dashboards from Kumulayo. So the first thing I'm doing here is adding another if dashboards tabs exist, do something. And within that, we're also going to check whether drill throughs exist. And then I'm going to add drill throughs to the scope. So basically here, we're going to be filling in the scope.tabs, and below here, we're going to be filling in the scope.drill throughs, scoped dashboards. Now, this is quite a chunky bit of code, so I'm going to copy paste it again and then again walk you through it. Here, we're going to be looping through each of the dashboards in scope. So in the case of Angelina, for example, these dashboards, each of them will in turn include in small letters and with all of the spaces replaced by underscores, it'll include marketing, sales, and marketing drill through. So what this snippet of code is doing is it's going through the scoped dashboards for a user. It's checking whether dashboards, even the dashboards that we got from Kumulayo include these. It's making sure that it's checking them all in lowercase and with the spaces replaced by underscores. If it does, and if it only exists once, then it's adding that to our scoped dashboard tabs. So this is how we've got all of our normal tabbed dashboards here. And then we're going to do something similar for the scoped dashboard. Again, we will be replacing all the spaces with underscores, and the whole thing will be in lowercase letters. The reason for this is the way we set up our Auth0. The Auth0 scoped dashboards, all of the names there are actually the English names of the dashboards, but we've made sure that they're all lowercase and yeah, spaces are replaced by underscores. Okay, we've got these ready. I think that should now work. The only thing we have to do now is make sure we return scoped dashboards. So here we've set up scoped dashboards, and hopefully if everything is working fine, and there's a high chance there's a typo somewhere, so I'm going to rerun this and hope for the best. Switch back to the main tab and reload. And there we go. So that already seems to have worked. We've got marketing and sales, and we no longer have leads. Okay, we've got that ready. Now the next thing we have to do is actually set up our authentication properly so that the user is not seeing the dummy data we put in there, but data relevant to them, and we give them custom CSS and themes, etc. Now, before that, you may be wondering how, without the authentication token, we are actually seeing the dashboard when we switch back to it. There are two reasons for this. For the sake of this demo, I've actually made these dashboards public, which seems ridiculous because we're talking about a secure multi-tenant platform, but they are public so that if you want to, you can copy the dashboards to your own account and try it out. So that's the first reason. The other reason is I've already added the integration code here in app.js. We go through this a lot, but just I'm going to do a quick run through of it for any of you who haven't seen this integration code before. Every time we click a tab on our front end, we actually in the front end call this load dashboard function. This load dashboard function takes in the dashboard ID, the key we get from the authentication token, the token, and the container, the front-end container that we're actually embedding it to. And then we're checking if the key and token actually exist. This is how we make sure that the dashboard is integrated with the authentication token, i.e. it includes the parameters and filters down to those parameters. And then we call cumulaio.add dashboard. Add dashboard always needs dashboard options. So dashboard options at the top is already defined. This is something that includes dashboard ID, the container, and some CSS for the loader. So some styling for the loader, like the name and the spinner color and stuff. All right, so that's about it. This was already there. Usually I go through this, but I've realized this talk risks being extremely long, so I have skipped that bit for now. But this is another reason why it is already integrated. But the main reason that it's integrated and is not giving us you have no access errors is because they are actually public. Okay, now we're actually going to set up our authorization token. Right. The first thing we have to do when we want to create an authorization token, well, we'll be calling a cumulaio.getAuthorizations function, but that also, similar to dashboards, needs options defined. I've already created the options here, and those include the type of the authentication, the expiry, inactivity interval, the securables that you want to authenticate, and the metadata. Dashboard ID here is actually, like I said, something that we get from the front end. So dashboard ID is accessible through the request query. So we've already got that. And then finally, instead of returning something empty like this here, we want to actually return the result of requesting a authentication token from an authorization token from Cumulaio. I keep calling it authentication, but it's actually authorization. So let's say return client dot create. We want to create an authorization token. So a few things I actually said wrong there is that it's not called authentication, it's called authorization, and we are not getting it, we are creating it. So with that result, we will return a status. So I'm going to copy that over and then also catch as well. So we've got that. And we're going to again catch as well. So this is where we just check that everything's worked out fine, etc. Okay, so now if we were to rerun it, it would look much the same on our front end, but we want to actually start filtering so that the user only sees data relevant to the company. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the get user property function that was down here again. And this time, let me switch back to the presentation again. This time we're going to be looking at the parameters that you see there in app data. We're going to check the parameters and we're going to add each of these key value pairs to our metadata. And then when we are creating the authorization token with the options that we provide, let's go back to the code. So when we are creating this authorization token with the options, because that metadata will already include the parameters, we will have created an authorization token that allows us to filter to those parameters. All right, so I'm going to start adding the key value pairs to options.metadata. And let's add that here. Let's save. And then even now, if I were to stop this and rerun, hopefully if I were to reload this now, I should see some different values. There we go. So the numbers are all different. That means we were able to make sure that it was filtered to company ID. However, the theme isn't there, the logo isn't there, and the name isn't there. So next step, let's add those in. One extra thing that we've done here that's slightly less relevant to what we're doing right now, but is still important, is we're also going to add any of the extra parameters we want to filter on based on what we got from the front end, such as, let's say the front end changed so the user has English enabled, but while they're visiting the platform, they're free to switch to French. That sort of stuff will also filter the dashboard, and a new authorization token will be created. So we're going to add those in as well. But before doing that, let's quickly see what happens if we want to change the CSS. So at the top of this file, I've added two flags, custom theme and custom CSS. These are here because you can imagine a situation where, let's say you have your users, but you've defined pro users and they're the ones that are allowed to change the theme, for example, while the other users are not. So you can turn this on and off easily with some logic if you like. So these are just some extras, but let's scroll down here. Basically what we want to do is we want to check if custom CSS, CSS, always, okay, I give up, CSS is enabled. We want to add those to our options. And then we also want to check if custom theme is enabled. And then we also actually check whether the user property even has themes in them. So those were, if you remember, were base color and colors. So we're going to get user property. And I'll just check whether those are the correct names for them. Let's go back to the, not the main app, the presentation. So we've got base-color and colors. So we're going to check whether those even exist before we attempt to apply them. And then we're going to add them to our options. Now, again, let me switch back to the presentation because I actually have an extra slide here that will be helpful to see. So setting up custom CSS and themes in Kumulayo, this is showing you how to set up custom CSS actually, is done by adding a CSS field to your options, and you can append CSS to that field. And if you want to have an image, for example, you would be adding this line here. If you want to specify which image element in the dashboard you want to add this image to, you can add the tag of it here. We don't want to do this because A, we only have one image element in our dashboard already. And the other thing is that if you were to not provide it at all, this image would be applied to all of the images you have in your dashboard. So for us, it doesn't make any difference. Similarly, to add text, you would append this to your options.css. So this is what we're going to do. It looks a bit complicated, which is why I already have it ready. So let's switch back to the code here. And what I'm doing now is first I'm going to say options.css equals to if user property exists with, let's say, if, what do we have? If logo URL exists. Logo URL, I believe. Yes, that's true. So if that exists, do something. If it doesn't exist, do something else. So initially, let's say if it doesn't exist, we're just going to leave it empty. If it does exist, however, I'm just going to copy paste this over because it's a chunky one. That's one. So this is what we saw in the slide. We're just going to add this with the logo URL property in the URL section. And then we're going to also append. So this time we're doing a plus equals. We're also going to be appending the name of the user. So again, as it's quite long, let me copy paste that over and save. So we've got the name, and then also I've just added this here. I'm changing the color of the name to the base color that we provided. Okay, so that's done. And actually, let me rerun this so we see this in action. So we will get hopefully a logo and a name in those two sections. Let's switch back to the main application. Side note, by the way, the base color is this here. So we're making the name there, etc., match to the base color. So let's reload it. And there we go. We've got her logo and we've got her name up here. Now to the theme. Let's switch back to the code yet again. And finally, the way we add themes is by adding a theme field to our options. Unsurprisingly, we've checked already whether custom themes are enabled and the user actually has those fields in the metadata. So first thing we have to do is define a theme. One thing to note, the theme always has to have an items background field available. I've already set up a default items background with white. And then the type should be set to custom in this case. And we're done. No, well, actually we're not done because we have to add this to options.theme. And we would theoretically be done. However, we actually haven't added anything special to our theme. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the theme main color. Hopefully I got that right. And we're going to get user property. And we're going to get the base color. So we set the main color to base color, and then we're going to set the colors. So these are the ones getting used by the charts, etc. And we're going to get colors. And there we go. So hopefully, again, if I restart this, that's running. Let me switch to the application and let me reload that. Voila, we have our filtered dashboard that uses company ID as its parameter. We have Angelina's name and logo showing up, and we have all the pretty colors that Angelina has picked for herself. If we were to log out, important step is to make sure that Brad's works as well. So you can see that the one dashboard that we created in Kumul.io is now multi-tenant and customized to your end user. There we go. All right, so that was very quick. Well, quick as in I went through a lot of stuff quite fast, but I hope I was able to explain how we achieved this multi-tenant platform with Kumul.io. It is relatively simple actually setting this up, but some of the key parts I do want to go through is number one, in dashboards. The first thing that we did was to set up the tags of the dashboards, because we use those tags to actually get the dashboards. This allows us not to have to go to like the dashboard and then go to settings of the dashboard. Oops, what have I done? And then scroll through and you don't see it because my head is actually hiding it, but oops, that's the wrong side. Down here somewhere, you'll have the dashboard ID in Kumul.io. So this allows us not to have to go and look for those IDs one by one and add them in our application. It allows us to just define a tag and get all of the related dashboards based on that tag. The other thing we did was to set the filters, and the most important thing we did here was to create our company ID parameter. And the way this parameter is filled, again, is when we create the authorization token. We fill in the metadata in our options that we create the authorization token with. And that metadata includes the key and value that we actually got from Auth0. So if we were to go back here, those keys and values are actually filled with the company name and company ID, keys and values. And that's it. This demo project, like I said, is a public repository, and I cheated a bit because the dashboards were already public, and so that allowed us to integrate them without actually creating the authentication token. But normally you wouldn't be able to, you'd get access denied, obviously. And the other thing I want to note is that while writing this code, filming this video, I did skip a lot of sanity checks. So the main code will include a lot of if-else statements that are basically barriers to check that nothing went wrong. So I only included the key parts that were needed to actually get this to work. So the full demo will look slightly more different to this, and obviously we did skip a lot about the custom events and integrating the drill-through dashboard. But if you would like to, feel free to have a look at the tutorial. Hopefully we have time for some questions now.